So welcome to Advice for Life. This is going to be a 6-week journey exploring the Lubavitcher Rebbe's guidance for leading a more purposeful life. And I want to start off by saying that although I'm always excited by the thought of teaching a new JLI course, we give them 4 times a year here, but I have to say that I'm a little bit more excited about this course in particular, and that's because it has a little bit more of a personal relevance to me. I consider myself, I'm sure many of you have heard this word before, I consider myself a shliach of the Rebbe. Shliach means a messenger of the Rebbe, or the Rebbe's representative to Pasadena. And as a result, the advice that we're going to be sharing in this course is advice that I attempt to live with on a day-to-day basis. Not saying I'm always successful, but I certainly attempt to. So it's a big honor and privilege for all those that have chosen to join for this course. I know that here live we only have Alan, and I apologize to all those that for some reason didn't get the email today. But for those that are watching the recording, I know for sure Wally always watches the recording, and Rochelle always watches the recording, and Leah always watches the recording. But definitely for all those that haven't made it live to the Zoom today, I want to welcome you as well to the course. And to thank you for the privilege of being able to teach you over the next 6 weeks. Over these 6 weeks, in 90 minutes each week, from 1 o'clock to 2:30 p.m., if you're on California time, we are going to be unpacking advice that the Rebbe gave to multiple individuals throughout his lifetime. So I think we would do well to begin with an introduction as to who the Rebbe was. I think many people are probably familiar. First of all, let me just say we're beginning today with lesson 1, which is going to be meaning at work. But before we do that, let's give a general introduction to the entire course, a little bit about the Rebbe. So the Rebbe was born in 1902, and he's universally recognized as one of the most impactful Jewish leaders in the post-Holocaust era. I'm not going to give a full biography of the Rebbe. I will recommend, and as many of you know, I send out follow-up emails to all of our courses, to all of our lessons, and I'll link it in the follow-up email. This evening, you'll get it at 9:30 p.m. in your inbox. I'm going to link a few biographies of the Rebbe if that's something you have interest in. There was one that was written by Joseph Telushkin. There's another one that was written by Adina Even Yisrael Steinsaltz. Some interesting books about the Rebbe's life. But just to give a really brief overview, the Rebbe was born in 1902 in the Ukraine, in a city that at the time was known as Yekaterinoslav, and today is known as Dnipropetrovsk. And to fast forward to 1950. Well, maybe I'm fast forwarding too much. The Rebbe married the previous Rebbe's daughter, so the previous Chabad Rebbe's daughter, and her name was Chaya Mushka, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushka. We just recently commemorated her yahrzeit. And in 1950, the Rebbe's father-in-law, who at that time was the Rebbe of Chabad, passed away. On the 10th day of the month of Shvat, the previous Rebbe passed away. And it was on that day, formally 1 year later, in 1951, that the Rebbe accepted the leadership of the Chabad movement. The movement had a glorious history. At one time, it had hundreds of thousands of followers throughout Eastern Europe. But by the time 1950 had arrived, Chabad had been almost completely decimated by the combined deadly combination of the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, and the KGB, right, under Stalin, Yimach Shemam. And in fact, the movement's headquarters, right, which today I think many of you are familiar with, and I think some of you have even been to, at 770 Eastern Parkway. At the time, the headquarters, or the main shul, if you will, was a small room that could comfortably fit maybe 75 people. And if you're talking about, the way Chabad likes to pack a room, for a Farbrengen, so maybe 125 people max. And the Rebbe formally accepted the leadership on that fateful day. And in the following decades, the Rebbe transformed Chabad from being just a group of scraggly survivors and Russian immigrants, etc., into the worldwide movement that it is today. But I think we would be wrong to say that the Rebbe is only a leader, because the Rebbe there were many other. I think most often people talk about the Rebbe's leadership, the Rebbe's visionary leadership. But I think that there's other sides to the Rebbe's personality. One major one that comes to mind is the Rebbe's scholarship. The Rebbe spent hours and hours and hours throughout his lifetime, throughout his leadership, talking about deep concepts from a Jewish perspective, deep scholarly Jewish ideas. And some of the greatest Jewish scholars around the world interacted with the Rebbe and corresponded with the Rebbe, and they can attest to the Rebbe's scholarship. But I think that the goal of this particular lesson, the goal of this particular course, is to tackle a third side of the Rebbe, a third side of the Rebbe's personality. And that was the Rebbe's wisdom when it came to navigating life on a day-by-day basis. Now, this is not divorced from the Rebbe's scholarship. We'll soon watch a quick clip of all about the Rebbe's scholarship, Torah scholarship. And that obviously affected the advice that he gave to people in their lives. But the reason we're going to focus on the advice that the Rebbe gave people for life, and that's why, hence the name of the course, Advice for Life, is because advice for life is an interesting genre. Obviously, anyone that gives someone else advice does so primarily, if they're doing so successfully, they're doing so primarily based on the individual person to whom they're talking. So to take really any piece of advice that the Rebbe gave to anyone and apply that to ourselves would be a difficult thing to do. However, and this is the stated goal of this course, as you begin to unpack the advice that the Rebbe gave to hundreds of people, to thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people, you start to see certain patterns, certain things that perhaps are applicable to our lives, by appreciating that this was actually a strain. It was a theme that the Rebbe went to over and over and over and over again. It didn't so much apply to that person's individual scenario as much as it fell into a broader approach that the Rebbe had to this particular topic. And so that's going to be the goal of our course. Over the next 6 weeks, we're going to explore the Rebbe's advice to multiple topics. And as we do so, we'll try to bring many different examples of it, often in video form. And the goal will be to try and find a pattern, to try and identify. And I guess this is my challenge to you, that your approach as we're doing this should be to try and figure out which elements of this advice can I actually apply to my life and begin to live my life in that way. Okay. So let's start off by turning our attention to the video screen. By the way, I should mention that because this is such a modern course, in other words, much of the advice that the Rebbe gave to people is to people, most of it, I would say, is to people that are still alive today. Obviously, there are exceptions, but this course, more than any other course, is going to be peppered by a lot more videos than usual. Like, for example, today, I think we have 8 videos in the lesson. So that's another thing that's going to be different about this course. So please turn your attention to the video screen for a brief overview of the Rebbe's scholarly, the Rebbe's extreme Torah scholarship and his extreme leadership skills. Okay.
It isn't only the Jewish community that values him, it's the worldwide community. And so many come here to receive his blessing.
Today, the Rebbe will be posthumously awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. A man who dedicated his life to helping others and to bringing people together. The Speaker of the House and I have many disagreements, but there's one thing, there is at least one thing on which we do agree. That is the awarding of this medal. This award, it brought Democrats and Republicans, liberals, conservatives, northerners and southerners, blacks, whites, and Hispanics. It brought us all together.
I remember the 70th birthday. People say that he was the new Baal Shem Tov. I rather compared him to the Maggid of Meserich. Although he never moved, he didn't travel. The Bear of Meserich was the one actually who built. The Rebbe was like the Maggid. He had vision and wisdom and knowledge and everything else, but in practical life, he was an architect. He knew whom to send where. I think the Shaliach himself didn't know why he was sent somewhere, but he knew. The Rebbe was an architect in this part, in this respect. He knew how to build.
And therefore, I have asked for the blessings of the Rabbi, of our great teacher. Rabbi Schneerson is a great man in Israel. All of us respect him. All of us accept his judgment. He is a great lover of the house of Israel. He has shown his deep sentiment and love for our children. His blessings are very important to me. I do hope they will strengthen me on that very important mission I am going to fulfill during the meetings with President Carter, the President of the United States.
A unique personality, no doubt, that serves as a leader for tremendous number of Jewish people, a person that on one hand lives in the world of the Torah, but has got practical sense to the realities of the life everywhere in the world, and great sensitivity for the preserving of the Jewish people.
You know, as a chassid and a representative of the Rebbe, I'm well aware that I am biased. Obviously, and unabashedly so, by the way. Obviously, when I discuss the Rebbe, I'm going to talk up the Rebbe's scholarship, talk up the Rebbe's leadership, talk up the Rebbe's visions, etc. And I'd like to make the argument that it's not necessarily my perspective. We just watched a video of some pretty famous world leaders, Jewish leaders, who told us the same. And really, just factually speaking, I mean, the over 5,000 Chabad centers, the over 300 published volumes of the Rebbe scholarship speak for themselves to a certain degree in that field. But that is with regards to the Rebbe's leadership and the Rebbe's scholarship. What I think many people find surprising is the amount of people that came to the Rebbe for advice. In other words, if these people came to the Rebbe for blessings, that would be one thing. But that's not the topic of this course. What we intend to explore over the next 6 weeks is actually not the Rebbe's blessings to people. The goal is to uncover the Rebbe's advice to people, which means people would come to the Rebbe with questions, requests for guidance in all areas of life. Health. Why not go to a doctor, right? Legal advice. Why not go to a lawyer? Relationship advice. Go to a therapist. You know, marriage, career, emotional health. The list goes on and on and on and on. And one of the questions which I'd like to throw out into the air right now, which we're not going to answer now, but we'll answer by the time we get to the end of today's lesson, even though it's not the official topic, but I think it'll become clear, is why? Why were people addressing these requests to the Rebbe? Why were they asking the Rebbe for advice with regards to their materialistic needs, business advice, legal advice, medical advice, emotional advice, relationship advice, etc., etc.? And you'll have noticed, because I think many of you have seen the course curriculum, that that's what we intend to do. Each week we're going to tackle a different one of those topics. Why? Why turn to the Rebbe for that sort of advice? So let's leave that question for the end of class. And I think we are now ready to start with the topic of today's lesson. So today we promised that we are going to talk about meaning at work. Let me bring the slides back up. There we go. Today we are going to talk about meaning at work. And we are going to divide our lesson today into 4 categories, okay? Category number one is going to be wealth. We'll start with the most fun one. We'll talk about wealth, the Rebbe's view on wealth. Number 2, the Rebbe's view on work and career. Number 3, the Rebbe's approach to retirement. And number 4, spiritual tips that the Rebbe gave to people to increase their livelihood, to increase their wealth. All right? We're going to start off with wealth, and we're not going to do this exercise. We're on page 4, by the way, for those of you that are following in the book. We're not going to do this exercise now, today on Zoom, but tonight we'll do it in person. But essentially what the exercise asks for is for people to try and estimate. We've all experienced Judaism for many, many years, right? We've studied Judaism, we grew up Jewish, etc. In your estimation, what is the Jewish religious view on work and career? Is it A necessary evil that provides us the means of serving Hashem, right? So in order to give tzedakah, in order to study Torah, I need a house, I need books, I need, in order to do all these mitzvahs. So therefore, I need materialism. I need money to be able to afford them. So therefore, I get a job, make money. But really, Judaism's approach is that it's a necessary evil. Money itself is evil. Is that the Jewish approach? Or is it part and parcel of our spiritual mission and journey? Or perhaps it's neither positive or negative. It's kind of neutral. And as long as we're honest in our business and do not allow our work and career to consume our lives to the exclusion of our spiritual life, we're doing okay. And I think that usually the answer to question 1 usually affects people's answer to question number 2, which is the Jewish view on affluence, wealth. Is it encouraged? Or is it discouraged? Right? If someone feels that having money is a necessary evil in order to be able to do Torah and mitzvahs, so then they're going to have a very hard time feeling that Judaism should want us to be wealthy. No, Judaism wants you to make enough money that you need in order to be able to live. And that's usually the approach that people take. But the Torah and the Torah's view itself on wealth, if you take a look in the Torah, is complicated. It's nuanced. It's not black and white. Let's take a look first at 2 texts which seem to be making the case against wealth. Elise, can you read for us, please? Do you have the PDF with you? Elise?
The book yet?
Yeah, you have the book with you?
No, I didn't get the book.
Not
No.
yet. Okay. So
Okay.
we'll be in touch if you get the book
Okay,
whenever you get a
thank
chance.
you.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank
So-
you.
Alan, it looks like you might be our designated reader for today. Is that okay? Or would you prefer that I read them? We cannot hear you. I think you're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted, right?
Yes, now we hear you. Are you okay with being our
Okay,
designated reader
and
for
where do
today?
you want me to read?
If you can, please text 1A and then 1B. Wealth leads to memory loss.
Excuse me.
Okay, wealth
excuse me.
leads to memory loss. Vayishman Yishurun Vayivat Shamanta Avita Kasita Vaito Shaloah Asahu Vayinabel Tsur Yeshuato. Jeshurun Israel grew fat and kicked, rebelled. You grew fat, thick, and rotund. Israel forsook the God who made them and spurned the rock of their salvation.
The argument being made in text 1A, and then again in text 1B, which we'll read in just a moment, is that when we grow fat, we rebel. In other words, when we are living off the fat of the land, when we are rich, when we are well off, we rebel. Why? Because we forget God. We tend to forget God. Let's take a look at text 1B, which is from Proverbs. You want to read just the English, Alan? I think we will save on time that way.
A poor person speaks with supplications. A rich person replies with impudence.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist, I think, to realize that wealth, and especially excessive wealth, can easily distract a person from spiritual pursuits and can lead a person astray. Why? Think about it. The more a person is wealthy, the more they tend to beat their own chest. This eventually leads to arrogance, right? An inflated sense of self-importance, which in turn leads to contempt and disrespect for others, right? That these are the messages of text 1A and 1B. And this explains why historically many Jews were weary of material success. And all this makes the Rebbe's view on wealth quite remarkable. Text 2 is going to be a transcript of a conversation that the Rebbe had with Rabbi Avram Yehoshua Heschel, otherwise known as the Kapishnitzler Rebbe. And they're sitting together at a Nichlom Avelim, which means a Shiva house. You know, the Rebbe is paying a Shiva call to the Kapishnitzler Rebbe, had lost a loved one, and he's sitting Shiva. So the Lubavitcher Rebbe comes by, and the Rebbe says to him, he wants to have it's a long conversation, and it's recorded on audio, and they've written it down, in transcript. But this is an excerpt from it. The conversation turns to wealth. Go ahead, Alan. Text 2, a choice of challenges.
Jewish individuals need to secure financial security, and that is an important, positive, and appropriate goal in and of itself. regardless of the additional imperative to fund Torah institutions in specific locations. Financial success enables Jews to live comfortably and expansively, and that will also enable them to broaden their perspectives for our sages. For our sages taught that a beautiful home expands one's mind, and that's from Brachos 57b. And they meant that in the most literal sense. If only all Jewish people would be wealthy. And then Kopyshnitzer Rebbe responded, wealth is a challenge. I fear the test that it poses, and the Rebbe says. Poverty is equally a challenge. If there must be a challenge, the test of wealth is preferable over that of poverty. God will certainly help us successfully withstand the challenge.
Interestingly, although the conversation, took a different direction and they wrapped up, and the Rebbe, so before the Rebbe said goodbye, the Rebbe made sure to circle back to this conversation, and the Rebbe said to the Kopyshnitzer, he said, I'd like for you to agree that Jews should be blessed with wealth. And the Kopyshnitzer Rebbe responded that he wholeheartedly agrees. The reason this is so interesting is because normally when we have a disagreement with someone, usually the result is, obviously we'd like to agree with everybody, but if you don't, the result usually is we are going to agree to disagree. Right? And here the Rebbe is saying, I want you to, hold on, he said he disagrees. So what's the Rebbe saying he wants him to agree? This has a lot to do with the fact that the Kabbalistic perspective on this is that when a tzaddik disagrees with something, he gives weight to the opposite side. In other words, the Rebbe didn't want that heaven should have any sort of excuse, not that any Jews should not be wealthy. The Rebbe wanted the Kopyshnitzer's holy weight to be on the side of wealth. In other words, the Rebbe's approach was, yes, wealth is a test. It can make you arrogant. It can lead to you not helping others. It can lead to you becoming, contemptuous towards others. Why doesn't he earn a living? Why do I have to support him, etc. Right? And we've seen this time and time again with many people in our lives. I'm sure that we don't need examples for this. But to the Rebbe, wealth was a test like poverty is a test. So if you're going to have a test, better be wealthy. Why? So that's really the question I'd like to get to. But before we do so, one more remarkable occasion when the Rebbe expressed his bias towards wealth, or his interest in Jews being wealthy, is at a Farbrengen on Purim of 1955. The video we're going to watch is going to be kind of a narrated video, so it'll give you the full picture. So I'm not going to set it up anymore. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
We'll start with Purim 1955, when the Rebbe spoke about the test of wealth, and then made an incredible offer.
Der Nizoin von Aschiris ist ein sehr schwerer Nizoin, von deswegen allweil alle Jiden gesagt geworden, sollen alle werden gewinnen. In Amerika ist minig, jede Sache stellt nach Wut als Abstimmung. Die was eine Maske im Mann nehmen als hier, der Rebester soll sie geben, Aschiris der Floge. Und sie hat nicht der Haravani, was sie und der darf willkommen haben. Mit dem Jezer Horror soll sie nicht Machschel sein, soll nur heben der rechte Hand der Leberschollen.
We were sitting by a Farbrengen, and the Rebbe said that anyone who wants to become wealthy, raise your hands. Now, who has the audacity that I should ask the Rebbe about Gashmias? The Rebbe is for Ruchnistic, so most of the people wouldn't have the audacity to raise their hand.
Reb Shmuel Isaac Popak was said to have raised his hand, a fact that he would never confirm or deny, although he always told the story.
6 or 7 people raised their hands, and they all became millionaires. Subsequently, I asked the Rebbe for a broche. I had no parnosa at all, and the Rebbe told me I should go into real estate, which I did. And I told the Rebbe I had no money. The Rebbe says, you don't need money to go into real estate. So through certain maneuvering, we were able to buy 2 houses without any cash. That started us off in the real estate business, and thank God we make a living.
You know, the individual of blessed memory who we were just watching, who was at that Farbrengen, is actually the great uncle of Rabbi Label's wife, right? For those who know Rabbi Label here at Chabad of Pasadena, so his wife Menucha Bela, that's her great uncle. And when he says he makes a living, trust me, we should all be so lucky to make a living the way he made a living. So why was the Rebbe so pro wealth? I think in order to appreciate why the Rebbe was so pro wealth, we really have to get to the second step in our lesson, which is the Rebbe's approach to work and career. In other words, why do we work? What is the purpose of working? Why do we have a career? Right? Society, I think, tends to take the perspective that work is a necessary evil. Let me paint a typical scenario for you. I mean, not typical, but a scenario that plays out sometimes. You know, every once in a while you hear about a guy, whether it's with Bitcoin or with GameStop or back in the day, you know, with the tech companies or whatever, somehow they make it very, very, very big, right? They invent an app or something, you know, boom. And by 30, he's like the world's youngest billionaire or something like that, right? You read such a story in the news. And the most common approach for people like this is that they retire. It's like, I get to have an early retirement. Or if somebody's company gets sold when he's in his 40s, you know, and he's like, that's it. I have enough to live off till the end of my life. That's the end of it. I'm good to go. Why? Because work is a necessary evil. Work is meant in order to make money. Work is a means to an end, right? It's not the end itself. And my career is meant to bring in money, cash flow, so that I should be able to live, pay rent, pay mortgage, pay bills, whatever, you know, to enjoy things in life, etc. And when I get to the point that I can retire, that I have enough money, so let's say for the average person in their 60s, so then I let go of my job because now I have enough to support me for the rest of my life. The Rebbe, however, looked at work through an entirely different lens. To the Rebbe, every part of life is purposeful. And therefore, work, financial success, and by extension, we're soon going to see wealth, your career, what you do, your 9 to 5 every day is actually part of you and part of who you are. It's not meant so that you should be able to enjoy the rest of the hours of your life, but actually that's part of your mission in this world. And this is directly connected to this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, we learn a little bit about the purpose of life, right? The purpose of existence, the purpose of creation. Why? Because we got this interesting verse, and I'm sure many of you have heard this at Chabad before. In this week's Torah portion, we talk about the building of a temporary dwelling place for Hashem. This was preceded the Holy Temple that was in Jerusalem. There was a tabernacle that would travel with the Jewish people in the desert. And we learn all about it in this week's Torah portion. We learn about the fundraiser that they had for it, and we learn about the actual construction of it. We learn about the different pieces of furniture that there were in the Mishkan, etc., etc. And in the introduction to all of this, in the command, when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu and Betzalel that they should build the tabernacle, it says, "V'asu mikdash, you shall make for me a sanctuary, v'shachanti b'tocham, and I will dwell in them." Right away, all the commentary ask, why is there a plural? Why and I will dwell in them? It's only one sanctuary, right? So the answer is, v'shachanti b'tocham. Rashi immediately says, "B'toch kol echad ve'echad," in every single one of us. It's talking about how every single one of us should recognize that our lives should be a sanctuary, should be a home for Hashem. So in this regard, viewing the purpose of the world through this lens, we appreciate that the purpose for which the more abstract version of this is that what is the purpose of our creation in this world? We are put in this world to make a home for God. And this is evidenced by the reality of our everyday existence. And I think this is a very, very important thing. But by the way, this was always the Rebbe's approach. Don't overcomplicate things. Take a look at it on a simple level. You know, often I have bar mitzvah boys, and we talk, or you know, older people, but they're like bar mitzvah boys in that they're experiencing Judaism for the first time. And sometimes it happens when they ask me why we put on tefillin. Other times it happens in other situations. I present this bid for God that I have. I have a bid that I think I can do a much better job at being God than God can. How does it go? It goes like this. Let me ask you a question. God wants us to focus on our body or on our soul? Any person who's ever heard anything about Judaism would say God wants us to focus on our soul, right? So I say, okay, then I think I can do a much better job than God. And here's my bid. Here's my not my presidential bid, but my godly bid, right? What is it? I say I'm going to invent if I'm God, I create the world the same way. I create human beings the same way, except that I introduce 3 buttons on the back of the neck. What are those three buttons? Those three buttons are meant to eliminate three of the greatest interferences with serving God, with focusing on your soul, right? Your average person spends about a third of their life sleeping, right? 8 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, depending what age you are, right? Depending how much luxury you have that way. They spend time sleeping. So I invent a button on the back of the neck. Part of my bid for God is that I'm going to put a button on the back of the neck. You press the button whenever you're tired. Boom, you're re-energized. You're ready to rumble, right? Okay. If you're somebody like me, you spend another third of your life eating. No, I'm kidding. I don't know about a third of your life, but you spend a lot. So another button. Anytime you're hungry, boom, you're restocked with food. And the third button is anytime you need money, instead of spending the other third of your life, working so that you can eat and sleep, another button, boom, you're re-energy, you're topped off, your bank account gets topped up, and no need to work. So in this way, I have freed up 22 or 23 out of the hours of every person's day so that they can focus on their soul, use all that time to daven, to learn, to do mitzvot, etc. Right? And the $1 million question obviously is, I don't really believe that I'm smarter than God, but why would God create the world in such a way that we actually need to do these things? Or for the topic of our conversation, that we actually need to work. And we'll take a look at text 3, which is the Rebbe giving his approach to why this is the case, why we work. And the Rebbe presents this through the 7-year cycle, right? For those of you that are familiar with the 7-year agricultural cycle in Israel in ancient times, really to a certain degree today as well, for 6 years they would work, and the 7th year was like a Shabbat. And on a micro level, even though the Rebbe is not going to use these words directly, but we can apply this also to the 7-day work week, right? 6 days a week we work, and on 6 days a week we work, and on the 7th day Shabbat we rest, right? And the Rebbe explains that the purpose of all this is in order to invite God into the office. Alan, you want to read for us text 3? We need you to unmute. Sorry. There you go.
The Torah's perspective on Jewish life is puzzling. It informs us that God chose us from the rest of humanity and spiritually elevated us from regular people. That creates the impression that we must spend the majority of our time in sacred pursuits, studying Torah, performing mitzvahs, and worshiping at the tabernacle, and later in the Jerusalem temple. Why then does the Torah itself establish that the majority of a Jewish individual's life is to be devoted to material pursuits, in which there is no distinction between a Jew and anyone else? The explanation is that the purpose for which God created the world is that God desired that we actively turn this material world with all its corporeality and material coarseness into a dwelling for God Himself, through serving God in this world in accordance with the Torah that He gave us. To achieve that, the majority and the main thrust of our daily service of God is not strictly spiritual activities. After all, our spiritual activities are comparable to the divine service performed by souls before they enter the world and after they return to heaven. Rather, we spend most of our time specifically on interaction with materiality. Therefore, the Torah emphasizes, for 6 years you should sow your fields, etc. And that's from Leviticus 25:3. The idea is to bring sanctity and divinity down into our fields, the coarse realm of materiality, so as to turn our material and corporeal world into a home for God.
Thank you, Alan. If the purpose of our existence was to seclude ourselves from the physical and focus only on the spiritual, to alienate our body and focus on the soul, then those 3 buttons that I introduced would exist. Why would God create the world in such a way that we have to spend most of our time dealing with materialism? Which leads us to the obvious conclusion, which is emphasized over and over again in Chassidus and in Torah, etc., that the purpose of our creation is actually not to focus only on our soul, but rather to focus on synthesizing our body and our soul to make the physical spiritual. The ultimate goal, let's focus on work, right, on career. The ultimate goal is to be an ethical, holy, and spiritual person governed by Torah ethics and values in the workplace, in the world. Not on the top of some mountain in Tibet, not by meditating, but actually to do so within the physical world. Alan, you have a question?
I do. I don't think that was God's original intent. God's original intent was that you live in the Garden of Eden and don't work. Work is a
That's a very,
punishment.
very good question. So in other words, what you're pointing out is that originally Adam did not need to work, right,
Correct.
for a living. And then only because of the sin of the tree of knowledge, and the Torah tells us directly in Genesis, was he cursed, so to speak, that he has to toil the land, etc. I don't want to get into too philosophical of a conversation about this, but let me just ask you one question, which I think is going to show you the complexity of your question. Are you implying that God wanted the world to be in a way where we don't work, and Adam kind of messed up the plan? So the reality that we exist in is one where
Yeah, he saw that it wasn't working so well and he needed plan
Right.
B. We need a plan
Right.
B.
I understand, but you recognize the flaw in that approach is that you're saying that God made a massive mistake.
No, I think he adjusted based on man's free will.
Right. The problem with that is that we believe that God is omnipotent. We believe that God is omniscient, that he knew about all these things. So why didn't he create? Anyways, the purpose of my asking this question is that this to a large degree this is discussed in works of Jewish philosophy. And the conclusion that they come to is that to a certain degree, God created Adam with enough freedom of choice because he wanted him to mess up and end up in the world that we are today. So this was part of the original plan. It's a little bit beyond the scope of today's lesson to start getting into that topic. It was covered in a previous course, and I'm trying to remember which one because I like to link them. I cannot remember offhand, but it's a much larger conversation. I think it was in the course we did about Mashiach, which was called "This Can Happen." And there was a lesson where we went through kind of the arc of history and how actually all of these mess ups were part of God's plan, that there should be a mess up in order for a specific purpose, which I think is maybe beyond the scope of today's lesson. But to answer your question simply, I would say it was not Adam acting alone, messing up God's plan, but it was actually part of God's plan that Adam should sink to the depths that he did, and therefore we should end up in a world where we needed work physically. But that's a very good question and a very advanced question, I would say. But to get back to our point, the purpose for which, and I think that to get back to our point really doesn't even require answering that question. Even if it's a plan B, regardless, this is the plan B and the reality that we live in, right? So we still want to try and understand it. So this leads us to the spiritual purpose of a career, number one. In other words, we're going to make 3 points about what the spiritual purpose of working physically, right, in this world, making money, having a job, what the purpose is. And number one is that God specifically wants us to do that in order to bring a holiness and Torah values into the workplace. And there are lots of examples of this. But the most common one, the most obvious one is when a Jew acts according to Torah and he's honest in his business dealings. You know how often friends of mine that are in business tell me that they're dealing with non-Jews, and they tell them how impressive it is that all the Jewish people that they work with are honest people. In that way, we bring a sense of honesty into the world. We bring a sense of morality into the physical world, into the workplace. And obviously the opposite is also true. That when a Jew chooses to use his freedom of choice to bring a lack of honesty, then that's part of the challenge. And they are actually denying the purpose or going against the purpose of the creation of work, the creation of the need to work in order to provide for the family. Okay. The second point I would mention is in order to make a difference to other people around us. There's a great anecdote which we're going to read. It's text 4, where the fourth Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Shmuel of Lubavitch, as he's known, the Rebbe Maharash, has an interaction with a chassid. And this chassid was a businessman. The Rebbe obviously spent most of his time studying Torah and interacting with people and giving them guidance, right? And then speaking Torah in public. Let's take a look at what the Rebbe tells him. Alan, if you can, please, text 4.
My grandfather, Rabbi Shmuel of Lubavitch, the fourth Chabad Rebbe, had a close follower named Elia Abler, who, in terms of scholarship and aptitude, was a simple fellow. In one of Elia's private audiences with my grandfather, he was told, "Elia, I envy you. You travel to various fairs where you meet many people. In the middle of a business transaction, you get into a spirited discussion over a Torah insight. Something inspirational you recall from the public Ein Yaakov class that recalls stories and ethical teachings from the Talmud. When you do that, you arouse the other person's interest in studying Torah. This activity causes much joy on high. God rewards such trade with the blessings of children, health, and sustenance. The larger the fare, the more work there is, and the greater is the livelihood earned.
You know, this is such an interesting dialogue that they're having, such an interesting interaction that they're having, because the Rebbe is essentially telling him, I envy the fact that you are in the workplace. Why? Because I don't get that opportunity to bring godliness in whatever way, by the way. The example here is a Torah thought, sharing a Torah thought, right? But it could also be putting out the film with someone. You know, I'll never forget that when I got married, my brother, who's a lawyer, came obviously to Pasadena for Sheva Brachot, etc. My father-in-law was pushing him that he should have a pair of tefillin in his office. Why? Because the ability that he has to put on tefillin with somebody in the workplace is way more than a rabbi who, yeah, sure, the world that he lives in is spiritual. Everybody that he's dealing with is asking about spirituality. But the reason why we're told that we can work in the physical world, one of the purposes of that is in order for us to actually interact with other people and help them, whether it's helping them with money, helping them with a Torah thought, helping them with doing a mitzvah, etc., etc. Let's take a look at this video, which I think really drives home this idea. This is where the Rebbe is encouraging someone to do these sorts of things in the workplace. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
I just started a new job in IBM, and Hey Tavis comes along, and the Rebbe says on that day that everybody should be like a shliach. I didn't know, what did the Rebbe mean, everybody should be a shliach? Maybe he means that I gotta quit my job and like stop becoming a campus shliach or something like that. I wrote into the Rebbe, should I give up my job for IBM? What is it that the Rebbe wants? And the Rebbe like underlines it on the answer, and with a big, just one word answer, Lama. Why do you have to give up your job in IBM? I want you to stay in those things and be my shliach.
Madishem mitzad gever kinonu, als wo kommt und was für einmal mit dem Masse kommt, soll dorten Schmäh von dem Mäbischten, soll dorten machen, dass in der Leben also sein Schake, bis wir Schachanti besechen, ohne mit dich, in seine eigene Dalle Dame ist und danach gleich, als besser mit Bachut.
And that was what I ended up doing. I stayed in IBM. I had a very, very matzliachtik career.
So if you would give a warm round of applause for Mr. Moshe Rappaport from IBM.
But I felt all the time that I was doing shlichus. In other words, I would make speeches all over the world. Your desktop or on your wall, you're going to be wearing and so on, that are AI driven. But the real, all through my career, I would write to the Rebbe what was going on, what I was doing. Be secure. How are we going to manage the access control? Top people, CEOs, politicians, famous journalists from all over the world came to find out what IBM was doing in research. And I get to meet all these people with my yarmulke, with my beard, and so on and so forth. And Jewish people came over to me. And I was actually a shliach in that sense.
Where officers center in Hong Kong should pick up with you.
You certainly know that now Hong Kong is a visiting place for many Jews from several countries. And then you can influence that during their visit in Hong Kong, when they are returning to their homes, they will bring with them additional Yerushalayim. Yes. And that will be your business also. Yeah.
אני במקצועי נייבל ארכיטקט, יש לי מפעל בארץ גדול, ובזכות ברכתו מלפני שנתיים במכתב שכבודו כתב לי, שקיבלתי ממנו, קיבלנו עבודה גדולה מאוד, $2 מיליון. בצבא ארצות הברית, חודש אחרי המכתב. חודש אחרי קבלת המכתב קיבלנו את העבודה הכי גדולה בחיינו מהצבא האמריקאי.
זו התחלה גדולה, ואז יש בכך יכול לעשות כפליים.
אני מקווה, אני משתדל. והרבה עובדים שלי שלא היו יראי שמיים, כשזה קרה, חזרו בתשובה. וזה הודות לכבוד הרב.
עדיין עליך להוסיף עוד יותר בירושלים שלו, כאילו שבבחור יילו ויעשו קרליך על כל פנים החצי עמו.
The major exhibition that we exhibited at was in Brussels. It was a major upholstery fabric international exhibition. Part of our display was knowing that if a Jew came in there, he knew he would get caught in me asking him if he could put on film. The exhibition is going to be Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Rosh Hashanah was coming up Monday night. To come in for one half a day on Monday exhibition, it's a little bit crazy. On the other hand, I knew the Rebbe wanted we should always be at the exhibition, so we're going. Rabbi Chadikov let me know that the Rebbe suggested that we put up a sign at the beginning of the show that due to the Sabbath, we're going to be closed at Friday 2:30. So the customers, they'll know in the beginning of the show they should come into you right away. At about 1:30, suddenly I see a gentleman walking up and down past our stand where there's thousands of people walking. But I see he keeps looking at the sign and he's asking, tell me, what is this closing the Sabbath? It's an international exhibition. What's this closing Rosh Hashanah? I said, where are you from, sir? He says, Ich bin a Polische. So I said, you're dealing with a Jew. I said, how about putting on film? He looks at me like I went crazy. He said, film? Who believes in all of this? I don't believe in God. I don't believe in anything. He says, Ich bin durchgegangen Hitler. I went through Hitler. I never put on film, he says. I said, my friend, I understand you 100%. Once in your lifetime, you didn't have a bar mitzvah, you said. You'll be able to say, you're right, God wasn't right to you, and you had a bar mitzvah. He took off his jacket, and we put him on film. The minute he said Shema Yisrael, he broke down and started crying. He says, Ich kenn nicht. He was holding us out, Ich kenn nicht. And he sat down, and he didn't know what to do, how to thank us. You can imagine how we felt. Business, we didn't do that much, but we knew what we came for, and we knew we were going to have a good year.
And this is the next point that we're making, the second point we're making about the spiritual purpose of a career, the spiritual purpose of work in this world, why Hashem created the world that we have to work. In other words, the workplace affords us unique opportunities to inspire other people, which rabbis sitting in shuls or yeshiva students in kollel or I don't know, if someone has an approach where they meditated on the top of a mountain in Tibet, they cannot have that. They cannot have that kind of impact on the world. And it's working with that kind of attitude that changes what happens during your work. In other words, when you realize that you're not working just to make another buck, but that you're actually working in order to accomplish something in the world, then, like he says, we didn't do that much business, but we knew what we were there to do. The main purpose of his being in the business world to begin with was only to put on tefillin on another Jew, or to inspire another Jew, or in order to help another person, etc. So then he accomplished what he was trying to accomplish. And the third aspect that we are going to add, which is the spiritual purpose of a career, and possibly the most obvious one, is to give tzedakah. Most people look at the purpose of money as being something to earn, right? You're working in order to earn money, but actually to be godly when we work is to work in order to give, not to work in order to receive. Let's take a look at text 5. Alan, if you can read for us, please. To be like God.
1 second.
On page 12.
Right. Okay. To be like God. Who is like your people Israel, one unique nation on earth? That's from Samuel chapter 7, verse 23. The implication is that even while they engage in mundane matters on earth, they do not separate themselves from the true one. It is therefore appropriate that we do not perform all of our mundane engagements for material ends, but rather, in order to bring sustenance to other souls, pieces of godliness, and supply them with that which they lack out of gratuitous kindness toward them. In doing so, we resemble our Creator, the one God, for God performs free kindnesses at all times. Psalms 52, verse 3, and his kindness is true, not for recompense, in that he animates the universe and all its contents every single moment.
In other words, thank you, Alan, we are trying to lead non-dualistic lives. In other words, we tend to think there's two different worlds, the spiritual world and the physical world. The whole issue with with the secular approach to work is that there are two separate things, right? There's the physical world and there's the spiritual world. But when we appreciate that our purpose in this world is to be godly, to be just like the one true God, we should live a one true life in this world, then everything changes. Then we appreciate this is the cornerstone of the Rebbe's philosophy. The whole outlook of the Rebbe to work is that we shouldn't look at mundane things as mundane and therefore not spiritual. The opposite. The spiritual and the mundane are intertwined and cannot be separated. Every morning, Jews cover their eyes. Why do we cover our eyes? Right? By Shema. Why do we cover our eyes? To eliminate outside stimuli like that. We should be able to be focused and not be distracted. And we proclaim Shema, the belief in God's oneness, the oneness of God that pervades everything. And then what happens? We open up our eyes and we try and go to work, bringing that oneness with us, bringing that unity between the physical and the spiritual into the world. And this is why the Rebbe was so always pro expanding business, always pro making more money. Right? One of the reasons why we ended up with what's the spiritual purpose of work is in order to appreciate why was the Rebbe so pro wealth. Right? Let's take a look at this story. 1959. Text 6 is an excerpt from a letter of the Rebbe. In 1959, Rabbi Yecheskel Springer was a Chabad Chassid. He was a turkey farmer in Kfar Chabad, Israel. And in 1970, an opportunity arose to substantially expand his farm and increase his business. He was conflicted. On the one hand, it was a great business opportunity and you could make a lot more money, etc. But on the other hand, he already made a decent living. He was cool with where he was. He was happy with where he was. He was content with where he was. And he didn't need to do anymore. And we all know what happens when you do expand your business. It takes up more time. And that would take away from his time for Torah study, etc. Let's take a look at what the Rebbe answers him. It's text 6. Alan, if you can, please.
You questioned whether it is appropriate for you to desire to further expand your income. That question has already been answered. 10% of one's earnings must be given to charity, and ideally, those who wish to, step beyond the basic requirement and enhance their observance, 20%. In fact, Rabbi Schneur Zalman of Liadi explains that it is appropriate to give even more than that. This is especially relevant now that the institutions that require our charitable support require expansion, and therefore their financial needs are constantly growing as well. Consequently, additional charity is required, and that demands greater income.
And that's the point. That's the point. To the Rebbe, if you have an opportunity to make more money, go ahead and make more money. Money is not an evil thing. Go ahead and make more money and use it for the right purpose. Work in the right way. Use the money to give, etc., etc. At the risk of being a little exhaustive at this point, we'll watch one video. Mr. David Mintz is the founder and owner of Tafuri ice cream. Anybody ever heard of Tafuri ice cream? They were the first ones to come out with the Parav. At this point, they don't just make ice cream. They make non-dairy. They were the first ones in the vegan cheese field. Today they have vegan cream cheese, vegan ice cream, vegan. All these sorts of things. I think they primarily use tofu in order to make it. Which is why the company is called Tafuri. So Mr. David Mintz was the founder and owner of Tafuri, and he comes to the Rebbe, and you'll see. Yeah, he wants to sell his business. The Rebbe has a different idea. Take a look.
sein, nur mal hier im Welt, aufhängen eine Woche, wir so viel in den Ruhe, also so sprechen.
Baptisten?
Ja, also von euch Seite, sie drücken wir. Wir haben den Zoom, also so verkaufen.
Was verkaufen die Retail Stores oder die ganzen
Geschäft?
Geschäfte?
Geschäft, ja. Weil es ist erst, die Umstände sind nicht so gut. Und sagt sie sagen, die Company, die Menschen mit euch Seite sagen, dass sie können wachsen, ob andere Menschen kommen rein mit der Sache, ihre Geld.
Was da eine gute Sache, was darf ich auch jeden anderen?
Nicht, so muss der Rebbe heißen, also...
Nein, mit was manche ist, ich kann selbst aktiv verkaufen. Aber eben mit dem Geld, was sie bekommen, wird sie das investieren in neue Geschäfte. Aber mit was sein weiter aktiv mit der Wirkung, dass der wohl geben solche, wohl geben solche. Und wie ist das, dass die gegeben haben, also wohl geben die Menschen schwierig aneinander.
So, der Rebbe halt also verhalten eine Arbeit auf dem...
Ja, aber das Wesentliche muss als manche sein. Sie will Papier verkaufen. Macht nicht das, aber mit der Maya, sie so tegen die das, was sie bleiben bei, so das verstärken und verbrechen.
I want to take a moment now to zoom out to understand what we understand about this interaction, right? Because if you would just watch this video 2 weeks ago, you'd be like, okay, whatever, the Rebbe is encouraging him to expand his business. But let's take a moment to appreciate everything we've learned about the Rebbe's approach to business in general. To the Rebbe, working is not an evil, terrible, negative thing. It's not just a means to an end to make money in order to give the money to tzedakah or whatever. No, work is a holy thing. We're supposed to work in order to make the world a better place, in order to be able to give tzedakah, in order to be able to bring holiness into the workplace, in order to interact with the mundane and physical and material world and bring holiness to it, right? Okay, so it's not a bad thing. To the contrary, you're right, wealth is a test, but it's a good test. It's a test that we should embrace because it allows us to accomplish so many better things in the world. Appreciating all of this, of course, when somebody comes to the Rebbe and says, I'm debating whether to expand your business, expand away. Oh, but you're going to tell me it's going to take away my time of Torah study. Yes, but it's accomplishing much greater things. You'll be able to bring that Torah study into the physical world if you're working properly. This leads us to the Rebbe's approach to retirement. You know, as of 2021, the average retirement age in the United States was 65 for men and 62 for women, right? And many people spend most of their lives, unfortunately, working very hard and looking forward to the time of retirement. Oh, now I'm going to be able to do what I really want to. Now I'll be able to travel the world. I'll take on a hobby. I'll do this. I'll do that. Now I'm going to be able to accomplish all these other things. And one might think that from a Jewish perspective, retirement would be ideal. Obviously, from a Jewish perspective, it would say, use your retirement for Torah study and doing mitzvahs, etc. Right? But you would think retirement would be ideal. The Rebbe's approach to retirement is very different, right? And it's going to be very not surprising based on everything that we learned. In the next video, you'll see that the Rebbe advises various people not to retire. Why? Think about it. Think about it. You are given an opportunity to actually impact the world, make the world a better place. As long as you can do that, and this is not to say that we're against retirement from the official word. I know many people that retired from their capacity and they're doing other things and they're making a positive impact on the world. But on a very basic level, if the work that you're doing has always been approached with this three-pronged approach that we see on the screen here in front of us, appreciating what the spiritual purpose of a career is, so then as you continue to work, you realize, why would I let go of those opportunities to make this world a better place? Right? Let's take a look at this video. Let's go on.
Das wir lernen.
Okay,
Ein muss.
Ich will gerade so beten, vergessen von meiner Freundin.
Ja, somit wenn die gesunde Kinder und dann gesunde Psyche ist, dann macht man schon viel besser. Und vergessen wir die Zeit. Mit mir in der Welt nicht haben. Dann geht es gleich in Psyche. Sind strategische Teil, die können die letzten Jahre Retiring is only good for old people, or young and young persons. But 220, how much more you need? 220, you have 45 years. It doesn't matter. It can be good the first thing for you and Geschäften, that you can certainly continue it, not have to think even about retiring. You must gain much more money to give much more tzedakah, and to do so in good mood and good health together with your family.
And things are moving along well, and I'm not going to retire.
Yeah, thank you. Forget about it.
In other words, to appreciate the Rebbe's perspective on spiritual, the spiritual perspective to work is to appreciate it. To retire from it is essentially to retire from making a positive impact on the world, unless you're doing it in order to make some other positive impact on the world, right? And by the way, this is one area where the Rebbe led by example, as we know, famously. In 1972, there was a big Farbrengen for the Rebbe's 70th birthday. Thousands of Hasidim flew in. At that point, it was thousands already. You know, it was from 1950 to 1972. Chabad grew a little bit. And there were Hasidim that came in from around the world. And at the Farbrengen, the Rebbe started off saying that a lot of people had suggested to the Rebbe that the Rebbe should retire. The Rebbe should start considering retirement. The Rebbe said, no way. Are you kidding me? The exact opposite. I don't believe in retirement. I don't think it's a proper thing. And the exact opposite. The Rebbe called for opening 71 new institutions. By the way, Chabad was much smaller then, right? Today we think of 71. You're like, in comparison to 5,000, 71 is the drop in the bucket. But at the time, I don't know. Let's say they had 500 institutions. I don't know how many they had in 1972. But whatever it was, to add 71 new institutions in honor of the Rebbe 71, and they did within a year. Many of them in California, by the way. And there are a lot of institutions that till today credit their opening, mikvahs and shuls and schools and whatever, that credit their opening to the Rebbe saying he wants 71 new institutions in honor of his birthday. And the Rebbe said he's going to chip in financially for it, and he's going to help guide it, etc. So the exact opposite of retirement. But I think in the greater context of what we study today, this makes a lot of sense. In other words, if one fulfills their purpose through their career, retirement is absolving yourself from your purpose, right? So unless what you're doing is changing focus on purpose, but you're also going to be leading a purposeful life, like to sit at home and watch TV and travel the world, that's certainly not the retirement that Judaism condones. Let's put it that way. Okay, you want to use the word retirement, but you're doing something, that's a whole different story. Okay. I want to pause now before we continue to talk, because we've really done the first three sections of our class today. We've spoken about the Rebbe's approach to wealth, and then work and career, and now retirement. And before we go to the last section, I want to just point out the original question, which is still hanging for us, which we're going to get back to at the end of the lesson. But I want to point out where we're holding now on that. It turns out people are coming to the Rebbe, not that the Rebbe should tell them where to invest or where not to invest. The reason they're coming for advice to the Rebbe is because they view the Rebbe as somebody who sees the world for what it really is. He sees the world from a non-dualistic perspective. He sees the world from a true perspective. And when you view the world as truth, then all you really, meaning if you appreciate that all of these things, the ultimate question is, what is the true purpose of it? So then the best person to come to is to come to somebody who has enough Torah perspective to be able to see the truth of the world and to then give you advice based on that. So the Rebbe's advice was never, oh, I have so much business acumen, so therefore I can tell you not to sell your business. No. The Rebbe is telling them that spiritually speaking, the best thing to do, the most purposeful, the most intentional thing to do is to actually continue to work.
Zishi, can I share a little story?
Go ahead, Elise.
Okay, I was at work, and every other word out of my mouth to my students lately is, hey, I'm not ready to retire any minute. You might be my last group. We're at Kaiser. I'm with the nursing students, and I was sitting at the desk probably saying, oh, back in my day, we did this and that. I'm so old. I like to kid around with them. And then I looked down right in front of me at the nurse's station on the desk. I see a picture of the Rebbe. And I was shaken for a minute, like, where am I? Am I at work? Am I at Chabad? Why do I see a picture of the Rebbe right in front of me?
Okay.
Right with, there's a computer, there's pens, there's papers, and there's a picture of the Rebbe. And I got like, where am I? This is out of place. And so, I said, oh, I get it. Where did you get this? To the nurse. I don't know. It's been sitting around here. I said, I guess you have some Orthodox patients. So obviously I figured it was on a baby's crib.
Right.
She said, oh yeah, well, they don't want you to remove it. And it's on the crib, it's on the warmer, whatever.
Right.
So I said, well, what are you going to do with it? We don't know because we have a lot of Orthodox patients. So obviously it makes sense. So so I texted Honey, your mother-in-law,
Yes.
and I said, what there's a picture of a Rebbe here that they're probably going to end up throwing it away. So she said, take it. So I have a friend that's dying right now, I guess, or she's in hospital care. So I said, I guess I'll put it on her pillow. So that was, so I said, uh-oh, the Rebbe was sort of there like, no, Elise, you're not going to retire.
And I want to take a moment to point out that the main message that I would take in that story is that we should live with intentionality. Instead of living every minute, oh, I'm going to retire, live in the moment. Right now, I'm not retired. Right now, I'm working. What can I do to impact somebody else's life positively by working?
Right.
Okay, in your instance, it was a picture of the Rebbe that went from here to there, etc. But we can all look for our purpose in other ways.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only thing we're going to do now, before we get back to the driving question of the whole lesson, is to just do, and afterwards I realized I should have used this in the marketing for the lesson. We're going to do spiritual secrets. We're on page 16. Spiritual secrets to material success.
Yeah.
In other words, and it's going to be tied directly into everything we learned till now. If we have the proper approach to what work is from a Jewish perspective, then there's actually there's four main things. You see this over and over again from the Rebbe. The Rebbe encourages people to have, and this will help them, right? This will add in their material success. And number one is trust. Trust in Hashem. I know that Elise, I think you were at the class with Hani, right? In this book, fantastic book that I highly recommend. I'm going to link it in the after class summary. It's called Shara B'Tachon, or the Gate of Trust. It's a whole book where he talks about the importance of recognizing that our sustenance actually comes from God, and that when we trust that, when we operate that way, recognizing that our money, our livelihood, our parnasa comes from Hashem, then everything goes smoother. Let's take a look at text 7. Alan, if you can read for us, please. In God we trust. This was one of the things that I've encouraged people to strengthen in order to add and increase in their material wealth. Go ahead.
I received your letter in which you write about the anxiety in regard to the question of parnasa, livelihood. You surely know how often our sages have impressed on us the importance of trust and confidence in God in order that we realize that all difficulties encountered in life are only trials and tests of a passing nature. To be sure, the question of parnasa is one of the most difficult tests. Nevertheless, God does not subject one to a greater test than he can withstand. As our rabbis expressed it, according to the camel, so is its load. And that's from Kesubos 67a. The very trust in God is a vessel and channel to receive God's blessings, apart from the fact that such confidence is good for one's health and disposition, and therefore is also a natural means to the desired end.
So this is spiritual secret number one to parnasa, is having faith in God's blessings, because that causes them to be revealed. Okay. Spiritual secret number two, perhaps a little bit more of an obvious one. We spoke a lot about the cycle earlier, the 6 days of the week of work and the 7th day resting on Shabbos. This is one of the areas. Take a look in the Torah. You'll see this is the only place that Hashem says, please test me in this regard. Rest on Shabbos, rest on the 7th year, leave your farm not growing for a full year, and this will actually bring extra parnasa to you. Very interesting. Now, if you view making money as a means to an end, if you view making money as in you're supposed to put in your effort, make the money, and then use that for whatever it is, then sure, to you, working on Shabbos seems to equal making more money. But if we appreciate that it all comes from Hashem, then actually the less we work on Shabbos, the more money we make. We're going to skip text 8, which really just drives home this idea that because the world comes from Hashem, and Hashem gives us rules for how to live in this world, one of those rules is Shabbos, so that it's impossible that working on Shabbos is somehow going to make us have less money. the Rebbe alludes, I'll just summarize it. In this text, in text 8, the Rebbe alludes to the idea that we have to remember that money is fungible. So this is something that people often forget, that money is fungible. So even if a person thinks that by working on Shabbos, let's say if you work in retail, right? Open one more day a week, you make X amount more money, right? But we forget that money is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the luxury or the comfort that money brings, the things that money gets us. So let's say a person makes an extra, I don't know, $5,000 over the course of a month by being open Shabbos, but also during that month he has $10,000 worth of medical bills. It doesn't equal up. Then you would have rather not work on Shabbos and not have the medical bills, right? Any person in the right mind would be that way. There is no way to appreciate that our parnasa, our livelihood comes from Hashem, is to appreciate that there's no way that not working on Shabbos is going to lead to us making less money. Let's take a look at this video where we see two people describing the Rebbe's advice to them regarding not working on Shabbos and how they have blessings in their life. They had extra blessings in their lives. They actually made more as a result of it. Let's take a look.
I started a store, clothing store in downtown Los Angeles, 3,000 square feet store. I really seriously was saying myself, like, I want to close the store on Shabbos. I don't want to work on Shabbos. But it was difficult to think like this because most of the business you're doing on Shabbos. There was some Shabbos I used to sell $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on Shabbos. During the week, barely I can sell $100, $150. Now the contract, the lease I have, I was obligated, 20 years lease. The owner, he warning me in the beginning, if you ever was thinking to leave this lease, I'm gonna run after you to the rest of your life. I'm not gonna let you go out from it. So I wrote to the Rebbe, told them, Rebbe, I decide to close my store on Shabbos. I would like to have a blessing, I should not get hurt. I'm getting a letter, and in the envelope I open, I see $18, and then it say, 1, מתחיל מקודם שקיעת החמה וגדול הזכות. 2, להפיץ את התורה מתוך שמחה. 3, לתת צדקה שמה, to give tzedakah at the money what he gave me. The next day I say, I'm going to go to the landlord, and I'm going to give him the lease, and the landlord was not there. I came back to my store. There is a guy walking to my store. He wants to buy the store, he's telling me. So I told him, go to the landlord. He's telling me, I was with the landlord. I say, what the landlord told you? He say, you're holding the lease, אתה מחזיק את החוזה. He took a checkbook and he wrote me a nice check. Just can tell you, with this check I bought a house and I started manufacturing. And I remember going to the Rebbe, and on Sunday I told the Rebbe, I got a miracle with the store. The Rebbe was laughing and he went like this on my mouth, like, don't talk about this.
אנחנו השקענו שלושתנו בביזנס של לסגור בשבת. אנחנו צריכים ברכה והצלחה.
בשביל השבת ויום טוב.
ויום טוב.
ושבת
ויום טוב סגור.
В первую очередь нужно соблюдать субботу. Так как это Бог указал, что Асерес Хадибис, когда он дал Торы, он начал с того, что каждый еврей до конца времен должен соблюдать субботу.
I started my practice on Nulatz Avenue, and things looked very bleak. It wasn't going anywhere. I remember having a friend. I happened to have mentioned to him that I was having some problems. This young man suggested that the Rebbe would be able to help me, and I made an appointment with the Rebbe. I started to tell him I wasn't doing well here in Brooklyn, and I was able to find a place in Bayside. I was going to be starting an office there. He says, do you work on Shabbos? And I said, yes, I do. And he says, now you're going to a new place. He says, you're moving. Perhaps you ought to think about not working on Shabbos. It became known that Dr. Walensky doesn't work on Saturday. And it was unheard of. Dr. Walensky goes to a shul. I was very successful financially, very successful. Even in the way I lived my life, I felt more satisfied, more at ease, very satisfied with being Jewish.
This is spiritual secret to sustenance number 2, which is keeping Shabbos. Spiritual secret number 3 is making time for Torah study, right? Another area of Jewish observance that can interfere with work is needing to take time off in order to study Torah, right? Come to a JLI class or something like that with Rabbi Zushi. But it's hard because you work. And this mitzvah of studying Torah and doing so daily is something that applies to every single Jew, no matter how demanding their job is. In 1990, and this is text 9, the Rebbe addressed a group of supporters. There was a group of supporters that was called the Machane Israel Development Fund, and they were the ones who basically funded a lot of, it was a group of wealthy people that would fund, a lot of Chabad's activities. And they came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe highlighted to them the importance of daily study towards business success. Alan, if you can read for us, please, text 9.
A business person should dedicate a portion of their time each day to Torah study. Although this eats into the time that is usually dedicated to work, not only will this study not detract from their overall success, but to the contrary, Torah study clears and refines the mind to be able to make better business decisions with greater clarity and efficiency. It calms the spirit, leading to greater success in business and greater happiness in life. This phenomenon is expressed clearly in the Torah itself. If you go in my way and fulfill my commandments, I will provide rain in its optimal time. That's from Leviticus chapter 26, verse 3. When we dedicate time for Torah study, we are guaranteed divine blessings for success in a way that is optimal without stress or worry.
A lot of people, thank you, Alan, a lot of people tend to look at something like this and they say, oh, we're kind of bribing God. God wants us to study Torah. So if we study Torah, he throws us some more candies, he throws us some more money. But I want you to appreciate these spiritual tips, these spiritual secrets for financial success in the context of the way we've been looking at work. Remember, the whole purpose is not to lead a divided life. The physical and the spiritual are two separate things. To appreciate that the same person who gives you the money is the same the same being, Hashem, that sends you the money is also the same being that wants you to study Torah. So how is it possible that if he wants you to study Torah, I would say the opposite is true. That if you study Torah, then obviously you're going to make more money. Why? Because if this is what Hashem wants, that's the way to the most successful, to the most financial success. And the last spiritual secret to success is giving tzedakah, championing charity. Although we all believe in the importance, obviously, the value of giving tzedakah and philanthropy, etc., it often feels difficult to give. And the Rebbe would over and over again encourage people a few things. Number one, make sure that you're giving 10% of your profits to charity. In other words, and if you can give a little more, then 20%, etc. But then the Rebbe would also encourage people to involve tzedakah into the day-to-day operatings of their business. Right? So if you take a look at text 10, you'll see it's a letter of the Rebbe to someone, reminding him that if you want to go boldly ahead on a broader front, you should give more tzedakah. But then we'll see that the Rebbe encouraged people not just to give tzedakah, but to make tzedakah a primary part of their business. Let's take a look at this video. Please turn your attention to the video screens.
My business has been very bad, and I hope to God you can give me a brachas of my
you put a tzedakah push in your business and
Yes.
to arrange to have at least 10% given for the net income of the business to tzedakah, to charity.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yeah, God Almighty bless you. Have good news. That will put in the tzedakah push in the business.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
אני דור 11 בישראל. אני פיתחתי נושא חדש שמאוד חשוב לי לשלמות המשפחה ולהצלחה של המשפחה. אני מבקש את ברכתך. ההמצאה היא המצאה מאוד חשובה ויחידה בעולם.
באיזה שטח?
בשטח האלקטרוניקה. אחסון של מידע מחשבים דרך הטלפון. זו ההמצאה היחידה בעולם.
ויהי בהצלחה רבה ובשורות טובות. צריך להבטיח להשם שתיתן בצדקה 10% מהרווח הנקי. זה ברכה והצלחה. הצלחה רבה. $1 auf Meister. Sein Bedir, sagt die Meister.
So geben wir die auf den Cent?
Nein, die Parkett, die wird mäßig sein, so sein nicht die Dir, kann kaufen mit $1 mehr.
So, mehr wie Meister.
Das ist schön.
And this spills over into the Rebbe's advice to have tzedakah be a primary part of our lives in every single aspect of our lives. Right? Number one, obviously, is giving 10% to tzedakah. But actually, a much more prominent thing that you see all the time that the Rebbe encourages people is to make charity boxes a feature in your workplace. The Rebbe always wanted that in every single office there should be a tzedakah box. I have one in my office right here. Ideally, it should be installed in the wall, etc. And the Rebbe would sometimes explain the numerous benefits to having a pushka installed in the workplace. Number one, obviously, it ensures that charitable giving, the notion of charitable giving, is a feature. It's a fixture of the home and office. This is a home, this is an office that gives. But more than that, it encourages workers and customers to give to charity. You know, I have a friend who runs a multi-million-dollar business in Brooklyn, retail, you know, related to Amazon and resale and stuff like that. And he has a big office with 10 people that work, and then there's the warehouse where he's got like 50 employees, etc. Many of them not Jewish. And at the location where he has everyone wants to visit the office, at the location where he has the check-in, you know, like where they have to clock in and clock out, the workers have to clock in, clock out, right next to the machine where you swipe your card or whatever it is, also is a tzedakah box with a stack of single dollar bills. And every single non-Jewish worker that walks in has to take $1 and give tzedakah every single day to give it to charity. And I guess at the end of the month they vote or they figure out which charity it goes to, etc. But the brilliance of this, the company culture that this creates is one of giving. In other words, it becomes a symbol of a Jewish home, a Jewish office. This is not just an office, but it's a Jewish office. This is an office where work is not just treated as a means to an end. It's not just making money, but actually there's something higher about it, something more powerful about it. And the last thing is, I think it anchors the priorities of a person and a business person, reminding them why they work. I want to share a story. About a month ago, I went to a concert, a Jewish concert. It was to support, you know, I think they were raising money for the hostages or for awareness for the hostages, whatever it was. You know, it was Israel related. We felt like, okay, my wife and I went to the concert. We went with some friends, some family. We come to the concert. And one of the singers at the concert was a man named Avraham Fried. I don't know how many of you have heard of him. He's a Hasidic singer. And Avraham Fried, I knew this famous story about him, but I got to watch it in person on stage. When he walks on stage at any concert, anywhere around the world, and trust me, he's performed hundreds of times since he heard this from the Rebbe, he always comes on with a tzedakah box in his hand, a yellow tzedakah box. It's like his classic staple, with $1 right on top of the tzedakah box and another $1 in his pocket, because the Rebbe told him that every single time he sings, if he wants to have a successful singing, this is his work, this is his business, he should give $1 to tzedakah beforehand and $1 to tzedakah after the concert when it was a successful concert. And I watched this in action. I watched him do it. I took a little video of it because I had never seen it in person, you know? I think it's such a powerful idea, the idea that you're getting on stage now to make money, to earn a living, but the first thing you do is give $1 because you realize you're in an other mindset, in a making the world a better place mindset. You don't want to get distracted by the nuances of, oh, now I'm working, now I'm making money, etc. All I'm doing now is serving Hashem. I'm making the world a better place. And work is part of that. And with this, we're going to conclude the lesson. We're going to get back to our original question. We asked the question at the beginning of the lesson, why would people come to the Rebbe for advice? And I hope it's beginning to become clear. People didn't come to the Rebbe for advice because they wanted the Rebbe's legal view on this particular legal matter, or the Rebbe's medical view on this medical matter, or the Rebbe's therapist, social worker view on this. They came to the Rebbe as the master architect, the one that can see the Torah's view on the whole world and tell me what the Torah tells me to do. Tell me what truth tells me about the world. And I think that this interaction we're going to watch in the video really speaks to that. It's a powerful, powerful story.
Rivka Blau is the daughter of Rabbi Mordechai Pinchas Teitz, a prominent rabbinic activist and chief rabbi of Elizabeth, New Jersey. In 1961, she was vice president of Yavne, one of the first Orthodox student organizations on American college campuses.
Our mission statement was that we wanted to promote Jewish learning and Jewish observance on campus, and that we wanted to, I don't remember the exact wording, but that we wanted to enable people who want to know more about their Jewishness to find out, but we knew we had to know more if we were going to be that kind of a presence on campus. It was essentially Jewish learning, Jewish observance, not to feel so alone. And that if people wanted to learn more, we would be available to help them. Those were pretty much that was the essence of the mission statement. And at that time, we already had, I think, between 13 and 15 college groups involved. And we also had isolated students in different places. At Rutgers, we had 3 or 4 students. At the University of Pennsylvania, we had some students. Now, at that time, the Lubavitch Rebbe had a representative who would come to Columbia and who got friendly with the president of Yavne, Joel Levine. And this young man, his last name was Feller, told Joel and me, well, actually he told Joel first and then Joel told me, that he wanted to meet with 2 officers of Yavne and to talk to us about how we had gotten started and what we were doing. Our appointment was for 10 o'clock at night, so we came to 770 Eastern Parkway at 10 o'clock at night, and we were asked to come in to see the Rebbe at 12 o'clock. And he asked us many detailed questions about how we had started, how we had found each other, what we were finding on campus, what were the problems, what were the possibilities, what opportunity was there for people who were interested in finding more about their Jewishness, how could we reach them, what do we find worked well, what we found did not work. Very, very to the point questions. At the end he said, well, I've asked you a lot of questions, would you like to ask me some questions? And I had no questions to ask of the Rebbe. I thought that this was a wonderful meeting that we had just now had, and I said, no, thank you. And the fellow who was with me said, well, yes, I've spent a Shabbos or 2 here in Crown Heights, courtesy of this young man that I know from Lubavitch, and I hear all kinds of wonder stories about you. I hear that you know better than the doctor whether there should be surgery or not. You know better than the lawyer which way to proceed with a case. Do you know more medicine than the doctors? Do you know more law than the lawyers? I mean, what kind of thing is this? So the Rebbe smiled, and he said, you know, when a house gets built, the architect draws up a blueprint. He gives the blueprint to the contractor, and then the contractor tells the plumber how to do the plumbing, the mason how to do the masonry, the electrician how to do the electricity, the electrical work. He said it's not that the contractor can do it better than everybody, but he can read the blueprint, and that's why he can give the instructions. So he said, Hashem istakel ba'oraiso vara alma, the blueprint of the world is the Torah. So somebody can understand Torah, he can tell other people what they have to do within their own métier.
And I think I'd like to conclude with this idea. The Rebbe wasn't trying to give people medical advice or legal advice, or in this case, career advice. To the Rebbe, he was trying to give them Torah advice. So the previous 2 aspects of the Rebbe's life, which we spoke about, the Rebbe's scholarship, Torah scholarship, the Rebbe's holiness, the Rebbe's leadership abilities, all of those were what people were coming to the Rebbe for advice for. Why? Because they said, hold on a second. You get to look at the world from a holy perspective, from a Torah perspective, from a spiritual perspective. You see truth as it is. Do me a favor, share some of that truth with me and guide me in this particular aspect of my life. Now, nobody's saying a doctor shouldn't be involved. Nobody's saying a lawyer shouldn't be involved. The Rebbe often encouraged people to use doctors and lawyers, etc. He wasn't saying that he's a replacement for that. But the idea was that the Rebbe was sharing with them the architect's perspective. He was sharing with them the Torah's perspective. He was sharing with them the truth of each of these items. So hopefully over the past 90 minutes, you've gained some insight as to what it means to work from a Torah perspective. And then the ripple effect of that has been some of the advice that the Rebbe gave people about what a Jewish approach to work is, based on understanding the true approach to work from the Torah. And that, my friends, is the plan over the next few weeks. Each week, we're going to take a different field, different genre. Next week, for example, is going to be all about family bliss. Later, we'll do about health, physical health, and then emotional health. We'll do about spirituality, but all of it will be from the same perspective. trying to understand the advice that the Rebbe shared with people based on the truth of the Torah in this world. Please turn your attention to the video screens for a summary of today's lesson. Oh, hold on. Right, this is just they're teasing next week's lesson, when we're going to talk about family bliss. Please turn your attention to
Lesson 1.
For a summary of
Meaning at work. 1. People consulted with the Rebbe regarding all areas of life in the belief that his advice stemmed from a deep understanding of the Torah. 2. Work is not just a necessary means of obtaining a livelihood to sustain more elevated achievements, but it has inherent value and purpose. God designed the world in a way that we are forced to spend the majority of our time engaged in work because bringing holiness and Torah values into the mundane workplace is the ultimate purpose of creation. 3. The workplace also affords us unique opportunities to inspire others to be better people. And earning money enables us to partner with God by giving charity to others. 4. The Rebbe was critical of retirement, seeing that work is our means of fulfilling our life purpose. 5. Spiritual investment holds the secret to success in all areas of life, including financial. The Rebbe emphasized the importance of faith in God, Shabbat observance, setting aside time for Torah study, and giving charity as keys to financial success.
Thank you all for joining us for lesson 1 of Advice for Life, Meaning at Work. And we look forward to greeting you all next week, same time, same place. Or if you'd like to, you can come at 7:30 p.m. You don't even need to let me know. You can alternate between the two of them for lesson 2, Family Bliss.
Okay, bye, Zushi. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you all for joining us.